Okay, in this piece, I want to talk about working with foreign investors. What do I mean by that? Well, there's a lot of collaborations go on with our landlords where they're working on a joint venture basis with another individual who may have money and bring that into the party to buy properties. Now, what if that other individual, that third party, doesn't live in the UK? Now, that might be an expat, but it could be someone that's never, ever stepped foot in the UK. And that's what I mean by a foreign investor. Someone that lives abroad, but is happy to use their own funds in the UK to buy UK property, usually with someone that's living in the UK, but not necessarily. It might be just someone that is a foreign investor on their own. But like I say, the more common scenario is someone that is living in the UK that can be the eyes and ears with the foreign investor as well to maybe organise the sort of purchases. But the money's coming in from abroad. Well, things to think about. What are lenders looking at that they would find attractive or indeed otherwise? Well, one thing I've said on here is, well, what country does that foreign investor live in? Because lenders have got a list, and that list is pretty generic across the board. It's not unique to each lender. So the list is pretty much the same whichever lender you talk to, whereby they have low, medium, and high-risk countries. So if your foreign investor happens to live in a high-risk country, then you're unlikely to get this joint venture off the ground. And the high-risk country will be more, it will be not about the individual, it's about the regime, it's about the government, it's about the amount of corruption that goes on in those countries. And these are assessed and given a marker from AAA to AA to B to C ratings, right down to essentially junk countries. And so understanding that list, and obviously it can be ascertained really quickly whether lenders will find that country, put that country in a high risk or low risk, and whether you're worth spending your time collaborating with people that are in these particular countries. So understanding that is really important. In terms of the due diligence that can be done by lenders, as you can imagine, if you've got someone that lives in another country that's going to be a party to the mortgage, and they're highly likely to be a party, they can't just bring the money into the country to give to you and you then go ahead and buy the property in your sole name. They'll want that investor to be a director shareholder of the company. So they can do a certain amount of due diligence on that individual, but it's still going to be restricted because they can't do a credit check on someone that lives abroad. That information's not available. So as a consequence, we'll also see, and I'm going to talk about rates in a little bit, you will see that interest rates are going to be a little higher because it's seen as a higher risk to the lender. Now, the typical checks that would be done on someone in the UK about ID and proof of address is obviously still then done on someone that lives abroad. So that individual abroad will need to take those documents to a local notary or a solicitor and get them certified. That's pretty typical. And then sent over to the lender in the UK for assessment. Sometimes there's other documentation that's required for the lender. And if that documentation is in a foreign language, then there's going to be a cost to get that translated. So be mindful of that. Again, in terms of preparation, you'll need to be considering, one, if you speak to your broker, what documentation might be required from a lender. And if it's not in an English language, then again, it might need to be translated accordingly so that the lender can understand it. So be mindful of that. Probably in my experience, one of the biggest areas that goes under the microscope is actually the source of funds. Where have the funds come from? What's the story that's been given for the source of the deposit and the investment coming into the UK? How did that foreign investor get that money in the first place? Have they sold assets? Can you prove that they've sold an asset? Maybe another property, maybe something else, maybe a business. So what other documentation can that foreign investor provide to demonstrate and paint that picture And again, the lender's looking for plausibility. Does it look plausible? Does it look realistic that this foreign investor will have done what they're saying they've done to generate this pot of money that's now going to be used for deposits? So, as much information, documentation that you and your foreign investor can pull together to paint that complete picture, the better. You can't shortchange in that area, in my opinion, because lenders are really nervous about that aspect and want to get real confidence that the money is coming from the source that you're saying it's come from. And to that effect, probably 6 months worth of bank statements from that foreign investor, it would not be unrealistic. Now, how does this all translate? If I'm saying, oh, there's a high risk to the lender because there's a lack of information, they don't know, they can't do as much checks and balances on a foreign investor that they can do on you and I. Well, you might be pleasantly surprised. When I looked in the last few days, you could probably get rates starting around 6%. And it's only, 6 months ago, we'd be saying 6-7% for UK landlords. Okay, those rates have now dropped again. But to get rates of 6 to 7%, if you're working with a foreign investor, would not be shabby at all. So that's the sort of rates we're looking at. And you can get to 75% loan to value. You can get interest only, just like a typical UK buy-to-let mortgage. So in that respect, it's very, very similar. There's parallels to just getting a mortgage as if it were you and I getting it on our own. So no other real sort of restrictions from that point of view, just possibly a 1% increase on the rate to cover the risk of the lender. In terms of property types, again, no restrictions. So, if you and your foreign investor or your expat are looking to buy HMOs, buy long-term buy-to-lets, buy holiday lets, buy service accommodation, buy multi-unit freehold blocks, all those different types of investment property, then lenders will have appetite to lend to you on that basis. So that's good news. So the takeaway message really for me is speak to your broker as soon as possible. It was only yesterday, for example, I had a Zoom call with someone in the UK and someone in Hong Kong. So we had that three-way conversation. The money's coming in from Hong Kong. And we were talking through what the requirements are likely to be, what the chap in Hong Kong needs to provide in terms of documentation to get their ducks lined up. Interestingly, they jumped the gun a little bit, and they'd already set up a limited company before speaking to the brokers. And they thought it would be a great idea for the son of the person in Hong Kong to be a shareholder director of that mortgage. Now, that son is 18 years old, and usually lenders want a minimum age of 21. So already we're going to have to unpick and amend the structure before we can move forward. So there's one real good example of speak to your broker before you start to put these things in place. Don't make those assumptions, otherwise we might have to undo it. And of course that causes delays. It might, of course then cause further time and indeed maybe more expense involved to make sure that everything is set up correctly. So speak to your broker. So, we're more than happy to have those Zoom calls with the foreign investor. So we've got that three-way conversation to make sure that your planning and preparation is methodical. You've got everything lined up before you start putting in the time and effort to start sourcing those properties. So if you're looking to do that this year and you want to have a chat with us to understand what needs to be prepared, then there'll be a link below the video. Just click on it, book some time in with the team, and we're more than happy to share our view on the sort of information that you need, or maybe set up that three-way meeting, as I said.